Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Decryption, and I hope you are well. In the previous NPC Spawner video, we've added the ability to use EQS to spawn the NPCs, so you pretty much can't see them spawn in anymore. So you can see he's spawned around the corner. And if we look around, you can see they're spawning whilst we're not looking at them, which is great. However, in this episode, we're going to look at adding territorial-based NPC spawning. So if you run over to one area, it spawns a certain type of NPC, but if you run over to a different area, it'll spawn a different type. So let's get started. So I've been looking at doing the territory spawns for a bit now, and there's always been one flaw that we need to address now, and that's the logic behind how we spawn NPCs, how we choose one. And this is something massive that I've gone delving down in randomly to try and figure this out. And the best way to explain it to you is I'm going to come to our friend, the drawing tablet. So the way we're currently spawning it is we have a list of NPCs, and against each list, we have a percentage chance that we spawn them. So this is 0.2, this one has 0.4, and this one has 0.7, right? But then what we were doing was just simply randomizing between these, and then we were saying, hey, run a bull, does 0.7 pass the bull, yes or no? And then we'd spawn that one. But that wouldn't always work, because that would give 0.2 a 20% chance if the randomization of it worked. So if we did, say, if 0.2 was red and we gave them this block here, and 0.4 had this block here, and 0.7 had this block, no matter which way we sort them, they all kind of get equal opportunity to be the correct version. Which means probability-wise, they're not actually any better off. They get a stronger chance of being picked, sure, but when we simply randomise which order these are in, they all get the same chance of opportunity to be picked. So whether it's red, blue, green, blue, red, green, they all get the same randomisation chance to be the first to be picked. Which means if we somewhat get unlucky and red seems to be always picked first, it's got the higher chance of actually being picked. I know that seems weird, and it did seem weird to me as well. But this is where I started looking into something I found online called the cumulative distribution function. And apparently this is all about this exact issue we have where you have a set results, they've got weighted chances, and how do you accurately, mathematically, give them all their correct slot and choice to run. And the key part of this, what I found, is we still do most of this, except we change it in one key aspect. So instead of randomizing which one is checked first, instead we don't randomize at all. We add every single one to a list, but then we give it a weight based on its amount. So if this is 0.2, we'll put it here. If this is 0.4, we'll put it here, giving 0.7 the biggest slot, right? So now, with this, we can see that because we've spread it out more, they actually have more of a chance to be selected. But instead of selecting this by randomly changing which one goes first, because that's still not going to solve the issue, the key difference is now, is instead of doing this, we get the weight of this, so 0.2, and then we get the weight of this 0.4, and the weight of this 0.7, and we add them all together to get 1.3. And then using that number, we randomly generate a number, we'll call Rn, based on that, so between 0 and 1.3. And that might give us some random number, like 0.6. You know, it's completely random, just a random number picked in that range. But then because these values have a larger or smaller gap to be chosen, equally the same amount, except for the numbers inside of them, it gives us a much more mathematically accurate probability to pick it. So this one is between 0 and 0.2. This is between 0.21 to 0.4. This is 0.41 to 1.3. This 0.6 would land right here because that's got the biggest chance. We might redo this again and we might get 0.2, in which case it will pick this one. But it's actually got a lot less chance of picking this one than this one, who's got a slightly more chance, and this one's got an even larger chance. Some of them very well may have the same amount of chance, but because we put them into a progress, a list with a counts of it, it doesn't matter. So even if this blue one was 0.2 and 0.2 as well, and we added the black line down the middle, and we came and made this one yellow, for example, even though this one at the start has 0.2, and this one has 0.2, and this one has 0.2, they still get the same opportunity to be picked, but then the 0.7 has a greater chance because it's a bigger block. I hope that makes sense, because that's what we're going to be doing today as part of the territory upgrades. The key gist of it is, we take all these profiles, we add it to a list with their weights, and then we randomly pick a number, and then we go for whichever weight has that number. That's essentially it. I know we're kicking off with some math straight away. I found it fairly interesting, and I'm not the biggest maths buff, but that's what we're going to be doing to balance out our probability scale. So if you have a guard that is only meant to be spawned 0.2 chance, but then you have commoners who are spawned 0.7, you'll see more of them accurately in your world compared to the one down here. So let's jump into Unreal then, let's crack on with it then. So the first thing we're actually going to do before going to fix the mathematically probability issue is we're going to work on the actual area spawner. So we're going to use just a simple trigger or a volume. A large volume we'll put in our world. If you enter that volume, it will take their profiles and add it to our spawner. If you exit it, it will remove the profiles. That's simple. And in the next episode, after we've done all of this, we're going to look at doing cheats, because everybody loves cheats, where you can say clowns only, and then every NPC that spawns is a clown of some kind, because that'll be really cool. Let's make our first basic NPC volume. So I'm going to come into my blueprints NPC spawner, and I'm going to create a new blueprint class. And now it's kind of up to you which type of trigger you pick, or if you want a custom shape. For me, I'm probably just going to go with a box, just so we can see it nice and easily in the world. You could go with a sphere, or you could go with something else, it's up to you. But I'm going to select a trigger box, and I'll call this trigger underscore spawn area volume. You could equally call it territory or something like that, but I'm calling it area specifically instead of territories. Territories are typically more organised areas, you know. Group 1 owns this territory, whereas area is, it's the factory area, it's the road area, it's the building area. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to scale this up quite large, to be fair. Probably something like that, where it's 200, 200, 200. And we'll drop that into the world in a minute. But to make this a bit easier to see and know what it is, I'm actually going to come and add a text renderer to it. And I'm going to move it above the box. And I'll do some basic stuff, like I'll center align it, just to make it a bit easier. I'll probably scale it up a little bit, just so it sits in. But then I'm going to come and find hidden, and tick hidden in game so we can't see it. And then I'll choose visible, and I'll make sure it's ticked as visible. And all that means is when we're in the game, we won't see it, it's not rendered, it doesn't do anything, but in the editor, it's perfectly visible. We can also come and untick a bunch of the shadow stuff if we want to, collisions, nav mesh, just make it as light as you can. We're really not going to be using it in the game. And then on the variables, I'm going to create the same variables we've got in our NPC spawner here, where we've got the NPCs to spawn, but this is going to be specific to this area. So I'm going to create a new variable, NPCs to spawn. It'll be a type of our PDA NPC area spawn, and it'll be an array. That'll pretty much be it. And then on our collision component, I'm going to come and add a overlap, and begin, and I'll add a end as well. And this is where we're going to tell our NPC spawner to remember this area or not remember it. So for now, let's just come and drag this into our world. Like so, you can see it's very, very small. I'll just rotate it that way. And I'll probably scale this up to something even larger. I thought 200 would have been large enough, but apparently not. There we go, 2000 by 2000, 2000. So that area there will spawn a type of NPC. So just to make it easier, I'll come in elf zone. There you go. You can even move this up if you want to. You know, just it's for debugging. If you press G, you'll see it'll be invisible anyway. And what I'll do is I'll grab this, I'll duplicate it and put it just behind it so there is a nice overlap because that'll look cool. And I'll probably just call that night zone. You can call yours whatever you want. This is just the type of NPCs that they're going to spawn for me, essentially. And then on each of these, we can add the NPCs to spawn that we want in. So for this, I'll say, well, I don't have a knights one, an elf one, actually. So we'll create a basic elves one. So I've created my new elves one, and for the knights, I'll do the same thing. You can even click the text if you want to. Into this spawn, we want to say more knights will spawn. So the way we're going to build it up is actually using a modifier style. So you know how I said we have the chance to spawn, and each of these have their own chances to spawn here. Our world spawner also has NPCs it's supposed to spawn just generically everywhere, right? The reason we've done the generic ones is you can drag it into a world. Generic NPCs will always be about. If you go into a specific zone, those specific NPCs will be added to the list. But the benefit of it is if multiple areas spawn the same NPC, we're not going to double them up. We'll actually just increase their chance to spawn. So we're saying, hey, you're in an area where 2 of these areas are saying elves are supposed to spawn more of them. And that will override and give them a higher probability than the generic ones. But equally, if this area here says it's supposed to spawn more generic ones, it will double their chances. And then you can do this as many times as you want. So we actually need to link these areas to the NPC spawner. So I'm going to open up my NPC spawner. I'm going to add an array. I'm going to add a new variable called area modifiers. And this is simply going to be our trigger spawn area volume. It's just going to be an object reference as an array to it, right? And now that we've got that, we can come back to the trigger spawn areas here. We can double check if the other actor is the get player pawn. So only the player is going to hit that. And just a heads up, I'll also be putting a video out soon where we're going to make it so we can stop doing this, where we specifically add collision profiles just for the player. That should be very cool. So subscribe for when that comes out. And then if it's only the player that's hit it, then there's multiple ways you can do this to try and get the NPC spawner. All I'm going to do, because the player's not going to be running into this every single frame, is I'm simply going to go and get the NPC spawner by get all actors of class. I'm only ever going to have one NPC spawner in my world at once. I will do a check just to see if it's a valid index. If it's not, I'll print out some text saying something like error, can't find NPC spawner, just in case you spawn directly inside of it or something. And then if we do, then we can basically now add this modifier to the NPC spawner. So just to keep it all consolidated, I'm going to create a new function in my NPC spawner called add area modifier. I'll get the list of area modifiers and I'll just call add unique, and I'll promote that to a variable just by dragging it back and connect it up like so. It seems a bit redundant just to have one function just to do that, but it keeps it clean so you can track who's adding what if you need to. Or it means if you spawn an area in the middle of a factory to change it in the middle of a mission and it might not trigger the overlap, you can use this to manually push it if you want to. I'll give this a category because we're getting a lot of functions here called area modifiers. And I'll also add one of remove area modifier, which will simply do the same thing except it will call remove item. So now we've got an easy way to add and remove them. So back on our sphere area volume, we're just going to drag off of this and do add area modifier, where we'll plug in self. We could go ahead and add a boolean to here to say whether or not it's already been added, so we stop checking this one. What I'm also going to do while I'm here is I'm actually just going to add a super private bool called b is added, and I will set it to true here. And the only reason we're doing that is this at the moment is going to trigger multiple times potentially if your frame rate is going up and down. So all I'm going to say back here is if this boolean here is false, then it can add it. And then the only way it can become false is if the on-end overlap removes it. We've seen that in the racing series, if you've seen that, where when you sometimes go into a trigger, there is a chance where Unreal can actually fire that trigger multiple times. That's just going to stop it doing it. Technically, the area modifier is only unique, so it won't do it anyway, but the get areas of class, checking the validity, then calling it is extra processes you don't really need to worry about. So I'll just make this private as well, and tick it as private, so nothing can change it. And then on the end overlap, we can pretty much do almost the entire same thing, where we check for the player. We only do it if it's already been added anyway. You technically should never get to a stage where it's not added and you're trying to jump out of it, but it's there anyway. Check the NPC spawner, check that it can't find it, and instead of add, we're going to do remove area modifier. Connect it up to the true, and across to the is added, which we'll set to false to reset it. There we go. So that's pretty much the area part done. So if we come back to NPC Spawner and make sure it's ticked as here, we can actually test this out now. So if we just play the game from here and press Shift F1 and click the NPC Spawner, you can see there's no area modifiers. If we run into here, we get an area modifier. If we run down here, we should at some stage hit 2 there. And then when we run out, it should remove the first one. There you go. And at the moment, they're not affected. They're just spawning normally. That's completely okay. So now that we've got our areas set up, we now need to work on actually modifying the spawnability and how it chooses and modifies everything. So back on our NPC spawner, the key place we're going to do most of this is our function randomly get NPC. So this one by default comes in, gets a list of all the NPCs to spawn, shuffles it and runs over it. But that runs into the issue we discussed at the start of the video, where probability wise, mathematically it's not accurate at all. It's just a quick randomization. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a function inside our NPC spawner that gets called every time the NPCs to spawn changes, or the area changes, the cheats change, whatever, changes the profiles that should spawn. It will rerun, cache the NPCs that should spawn, and then go from there. We're not going to make it randomly go over and start annihilating people, because that'll be very jarring. We're instead just going to let the normal flow take over it. But one thing we need to be careful of is our actual spawning logic has a lot of async loops in it. So we don't want to be in the middle of this and then outright remove a spawn, because then all of this is going to break down because it can't do it anymore. So what I'm going to do is add a super basic bool here called b is spawning. Now I'll set it to a type of boolean and it'll be a single. Make it private because nothing needs to really control this, like so. And then what we're going to do is every time we're starting to spawn something, we're going to actually log this bool, and it'll essentially lock the solution and say, hey, you can't do this right now. So b is spawning. I'm just going to add it here as true. So it's going to go off and spawn it there. But anytime we finish spawning, whether that's because there's nothing to spawn, we're not allowed to spawn, or we've finished spawning them, we always call end character spawn. So on here, just before we call timer setup, I'm just going to come and say, hey, we're no longer spawning. And because we've got that variable there, when we go to recalculate the profiles, we can just quickly check that and say, hey, should we be doing this right now? Or should we wait like a frame or something just to let it finish? So let's create a new function here called update NPCs to spawn. And this is going to be our cached function. So I'm going to add our is spawning in. And I'm going to right click and do convert to branch. If you're on Unreal 5, 6, 7, you can do that. Otherwise, just add a normal branch. If spawning is true, it means we can't run this spawn yet. So I'm going to call set timer by function name. The function name will be our update NPCs to spawn, and it'll just be a timer of 0.1. So we'll come in, hey, we're currently spawning something, wait a tenth of a second, and then recall itself. Yes, we could get into a massive loop here if it's for some reason continuously chugging, or it gets stuck, but then we'll know at that point, because then we can attempt to figure out what's wrong. Because either way, we need to update the NPCs to spawn. So if it's false, that means we're good to go. Because all of the logic in here, there's no async waits, it'll pretty much be instantaneous, or a single frame essentially. So we need a way to store each NPC's profile. So I'm not talking about the spawner profile here, I'm talking about the specific individual ones. And the reason we're doing the profiles versus the spawn area is if this generic one adds an Egyptian generic, but then we walk into the Egyptian zone, it needs to know that Egyptians need to be doubled up. Whereas if we're using these entire profiles, it gets a bit messy. So we're going to use individual profiles to store when we know we're okay to do so. What I mean by that is we're going to come and create a struct here, and I'll right click blueprint structure, and I'll call it s underscore NPC spawner profile weight, and I'll open it up. All it's going to have is two variables. The first one is going to be the profile, and that's just going to be a type of our NPC spawn profile, like so. Just a PDA normal object reference, that's fine. And then we're going to add another variable called weight, and this is going to be our float. That's going to be the chance they have to spawn. And then back on our NPC spawner, we'll create a variable called cached NPC profiles by weight, and I'll set this to our new NPC spawner profile weight struct and make it an array. We can make it instance editable, but either way I am going to make it private so nothing can change it. And we're keeping that there so we don't have to recalculate this every single time we want to spawn. We're only going to recalculate this once and then just update it whenever we need to. Makes it a lot more performant, since this is going to be running fairly often. So what I'm going to do is start by our normal NPCs to spawn. This is what's assigned to the spawner itself. And I'll loop over all of these. And then from in here, I'm going to get the profiles, and I'm going to loop over these as well. And I have made one minor mistake here, which is okay. We're using soft references here, and only when we go to spawn the profiling, we load it in memory. We're not doing that in our struct currently, but that's okay. We can just come and set this. Instead of just a hard reference, we'll just change it to a soft object reference, just so it matches up. And then in here, we can drag our area modifiers in. We can add to it. We can drag our cached NPCs by profile weighting. We can add to it, and we can connect it to the loop body. We'll then drag backwards off of this and call make, where we pass in the profile, and then from the NPCs to spawn array element, we will get the chance to spawn and plug that into the weight there. So that's going to populate the initial array. Before we do that, one thing I am going to mention, the first thing we do is actually clear this array off and just remove everything inside of it. Now, the keen-eyed of yous may wonder, why are we clearing it? Why don't we just update the modifier instead? And whilst we can just re-loop over everything, remove it if it's not in there, add it if it's missing, update the weight if we need to, that's a lot more calculations than just outright removing it and going, hey, add everything, and then calculate the weight. So I don't know how performant it is versus modifying it versus doing it. I know in database coding, it's actually sometimes easier to wipe everything versus updating it, depending what you're doing. In this case, we're going to go for the easier option. We're going to clear everything, then we're going to loop over and add the basic ones. So I'm going to wrap this in a comment, add spawner generic profiles. So that's the generic profiles one done. Now we need to take into account the area modifiers. So I'm going to do the same thing where I drag the area modifiers in and we for each loop over it. And I'll connect it to the completed. And then I'm going to drag off and get the NPCs to spawn. And we'll for each loop over this. And then we're going to do the same thing again as we did above, where we for each loop off of the NPC profiles again. And I know it looks like we're doing a lot of loops, and we are, but that's because we're juggling a lot of data at once. It's completely okay because these are all going to be rapidly fast. This is looping over the NPCs, and this is looping over the profiles. This is looping over all the areas we're stood in, which is looping over all of their NPCs to spawn and all of their profiles. So it does make a lot of sense, and it's not really any easier way you can do it, but it's completely okay. And then normally, we would just add it to the profile weight here. However, this is where we need to start looking at if they already exist, and then updating their weight on the actual struct. So what we're going to do is drag in our cached NPC, drag off and do a for each again on top of this, just to see if we can find it. I'll drag off the array element and break it. And to be honest, I've just thought of an even easier way in the middle of the video to do this, but it's going to take a lot of editing to remove all of this. So I'm going to add it here just so to show you that even with planned notes, and I've got a bunch of notes on my other screen, things can change whilst you're doing it. So I'm actually going to back off from using the struct, and instead I'm going to change this cached NPC profiles by weight to our MPD8 spawn profile as a soft object reference. Click yes to change the variable, we'll fix it in a minute. But I'm actually going to come and set it to a type of map, change the variable again, that's fine, and then I'll set the value to a float. And what this means now is instead of balancing all our data in a struct, making sure it doesn't exist, trying to find if it already exists, we can simply drag the new map in and do find. And it will search everything to find what we need, which is a lot easier than doing yet another loop on top of this, which should be quicker. Don't get me wrong, under the hood, this find is probably doing a loop, but it's a built-in way, and maps are something called indexed, which means when you say find this key here, Unreal knows immediately where it is. It doesn't technically have to search every single one. So it's actually more performant. So please excuse the error there. I don't know why I didn't catch that during planning. But we can come in, add a branch to this. So if it's found it true, then it means this profile is already in our list of weights because either the generic one's added it or a previous one has added it. So what we can do is put our map in, and then we can drag off and do add. And the cool thing about maps is if it exists, it will simply update it. If it doesn't, it will add it, which is great. So if it already exists, we're going to add the new weight to it. But the difference is this time is we're going to get the value here that it's found, and we're going to add on to it the value we need to add from this NPCs to spawn. So we'll drag off of this one and do get chance to spawn. And we will cover over this in a minute and tidy it up a little bit. And then we can plug this plus into the add there. However, if it doesn't exist, then we don't need to do the plus operation. We're simply going to add the actor into it and then add the chances to spawn as its default weight. So let's tidy this up a bit now, because that is a bit messy. And we've got some areas we need to fix, which we'll do in a minute. So I'm going to highlight all of this here, all this for loop and all of the adding. I'm going to right click and choose collapse to function. And we're going to call this update cached NPC profile. And we're going to connect it over to here. We'll rename some of the variables to make it easier. So we'll come in. So you can see it's only got one variable coming in. So we can actually just move this up to the top one and then delete this one. We'll call this area spawn. And this is going to take any area spawn we pass into it, whether it's the generic one or the territory-based one, or even if we do cheats next time. It'll loop over it, do the additions for us. We can technically make this a lot nicer now because it's in its own function. We'll promote this array element to a local variable called current profile, connect it up, and then because we've got this nice variable, we can connect it to the branch and we can just come and tidy this all up with our current profile. Connect it to there, connect it to here, and we could technically connect it here as well. There we go. So it looks a lot neater now. If you wanted to, you could also promote the chance to spawn to a variable, so let's just quickly do that. Local variables are completely fine for performance because they disappear as soon as the function ends anyway. So promote that to a local variable called chance to spawn, and we'll just connect this up in the middle like so. And now over here, we don't need to drag the lines over. We can come and tidy up, making it a lot more readable. There we go. So just a reminder, this one comes in with whatever area we've passed to it. It'll store the chance to spawn, loop over the profiles, store the profile, check if the profile's been found already. If it has, it will add our weight modifier to the existing one, increasing its chance to actually spawn, and then it will add it to it, updating it. Otherwise, if it's not found, we don't worry about calculating anything because we don't want any negatives or anything. So we just outright say, here's your addition here, and it'll add it in. And then we can come back to our update NPCs to spawn. And now technically, we don't need any of this up here either, which is very nice. We can just add in our update cached profile, passing in the area spawn. I'll make it part of that comment, delete the self3 here and keep that there. And now we can wrap this in a comment, add area profiles. We don't need to clear it up here the same way. We do technically still call clear, but it's a different type. So we'll just fix that and hit compile and save. We're all good now. I am going to come and mark this function as private, just to make sure nobody else calls it, and I'll stick it in a category of private. We don't want that recalculate function being called by anything except what really needs to, which in this case is going to be the update NPC spawn here. So this is where we now can come in and randomly get it using the CDF function that we talked about at the beginning. But there's one little modification we're going to do just for efficiency, is in order for that function to work, we need to get a total sum of all of the weight of the profiles we've added, right? But that means looping over it additionally here, and then looping over it after again to try and find which one is the correct weight. And we don't want to do that because that's double loops for essentially something we're already looping over. So back in update NPCs to spawn here, when we call update cached NPC profile, we're essentially looping over and updating the weights here already. So what we're going to do is back on our update NPCs to spawn, after we've added all generic profiles and all of the area profiles, we've worked out all of the weights, we've either increased it or decreased it, however we want to. We're going to take one final look in this function that isn't going to call that often. We're going to get the values from here, and we can connect that to the completed, and we'll call for each. I'll then create a variable, a normal one, called total weight, and we'll set it to a type of float, and we make sure it's a single. And then I'm going to drag the total weight in, do plus, and we'll connect the new array element weight to it, and then we'll finally just set total weight at the end. So that's now going to loop over all the weights and recalculate the total weight, which means we've already looped over it here. So instead of doing it every single time we want to get an NPC, we're only doing it when we're coming in to change who's going to spawn, which means it's a lot more efficient now doing it at the end of here. I'm going to leave a bit of gap just so we come in and remember that this should always be at the end. That should be the last thing this function ever does. Because if we do it in the middle of it, it's going to forget to actually calculate some weights properly. And now back on our randomly get NPC, we've got the total weight. We've looped over the array once. So now let's find out which profile we're going to pick. So I'm going to drag off of here, and again we'll do values. And instead of looping over it to calculate the weight and then looping over it to find who we're doing it, we simply need to loop over now and say who have we chosen. So to get the correct weight that we're picking, let's just generate a random number. So we'll do random float in range. The min will be 0, the max will be our total weight. I am going to set the total weight to be private because nothing else needs it. There we go. Promote this to a local variable called selected weight. Connect that up and connect it up. And then we need to figure out where this selected weight is within this range of numbers. But these numbers aren't a range. It's 0.2, 0.2, 0.5, 0.7. That's not a range. So what we're going to do is create another local variable called current weight. And I'm going to drag the current weight in and do plus. And we'll add the array element to it. And then from here, I'll set the current weight. And then we can drag off of this and say, is it less than or equal to the selected weight? And we'll do a branch. If it's false, it means we've not found our current selected weight yet. So go to the next value here and rebuild it up and then try again. If it's true, however, that's where we can actually come back and actually start to run our spawn. So if it's true, we know we need to spawn it. So I'm simply going to make some more space because we keep running out of space. I'm going to get our cached NPCs by weight. And now that we know that this current profile is true inside here with the correct weight, we can drag off of here and get the keys, which are all the profiles. And we can say, get me the key with the index that is the same as the weight here. Because the weight will have the same index as the profile anyway. And that's the profile we use. So we can simply just, from the keys, return, passing in the profile like so. Meaning we don't need any of that code anymore. And that's our new spawning logic that should handle areas. So just before we go and test it, we just need to actually make sure we call our update NPCs to spawn. So back on the event graph, the first thing it'll do before it calls the timer setup is just tell it to update the NPCs to spawn, which will spawn everything into the cache from the generic ones. And then every time we add an area modifier, we want to call our update NPCs to spawn. And every time we remove, we will do the same thing as well. And remember, this is not going to go and delete anybody unless they're out of range. We could, of course, make cheats do that. I'd have to check the games to make sure if that's what they do or not, because we're trying to make it look decent. But it's probably going to be better that everybody who spawns after this point starts changing. And if you play it this time, you'll notice we may have a slight error. So nothing's going to spawn, and we're being spammed with errors up here, saying it's not got a current spawn profile. So there's usually two reasons that it'll be doing this. So it could be that you've not assigned any NPCs here, all the profile's empty, or in my case, we've put backwards logic in. So we just need to flip these around. So instead of saying our current weight is less than the selected weight, we want to say is the selected weight less than the current weight. So essentially like that. Because otherwise it's going to add 0.8 to the current weight and say is 0.2 less than 0.8? No, so it'll fail. We flip it around. Is 0.8 less than 0.2? No, it will fail because that will always be false. Whereas if we flip it around, it's going to check the new weight over and over again to the selected random one we've done over here. If that's still erroring for you, just make sure that you've assigned all of your profiles in the NPC profiles to spawn. You haven't got any empty ones, and that should clear it up. So you'll see if we spawn it now, you'll see we should start having NPC Egyptians spawning. There we go. So they're the Egyptians because we're not in any other zone. If I press Shift F1 and click on our NPC spawner, you can see we've got 0 area modifiers. But as we walk into this area, we've now got our area modifier. So when these NPCs start despawning, you see, we now have elves spawning in because we're in the elven territory. The Egyptians are still there because we're not out of range from them, but you can see the elves are spawning in. If I run far enough over here, the Egyptians should eventually fade out, and it should be primarily elves because they've got a higher value. But it doesn't mean they're entirely there because the Egyptians are still generic. Whereas if we run up to here, look, and we go into the knights area, we should start seeing now knights and Egyptians and elves all spawning. There you go, there's a mage from the knights pack, I believe. I can't get far enough away. There's another night, look. But if I run over here, we should start seeing elves completely fade out now. So as we run over here, let them all despawn, blah, blah, blah. There you go. Egyptians, no elves, and knights only. And if I run out of here, the area modifier should disappear. There we go. Run far enough away, knights should completely be abolished. And there you go. Egyptians are the only ones spawning in. How cool is that? You gotta admit that's really, really cool. And to be a cheesy YouTuber, you know that deserves a like, because that is really, really cool. So the benefit of this way now is now that we've got the territory set up, is if we jump back to our tree here, we've now officially got it spawning out of the range of the player's character, not in the danger zone, not directly behind them, spawning behind buildings and not inside them. But we've also now got the territory set up, which means we can run around this city and it'll spawn generic people. If we run into the purple zone, it'll spawn the purple ones, spawning the red ones, if we go there, orange ones. And we've built in the overlaps as well, just so it makes it really realistic. So you could be running up here and say you're running down this slot here and you've got green and pink bad guys. They'll start roughly spawning on the same street while you've got the crossover. You could even incite gang wars between them if you really want to. My game's not got any of that in, so I'm not going to worry about that. But yeah, there you go. So you can essentially build this up however you want now. And if you want to totally remove, say, Egyptians from the Elven zone here, so you say when you're in here, no Egyptians at all, you can just negatize what they are. So if I add a new profile in here of, say, the generic, but I'm going to duplicate it and say generic remove, and we will come in and set that to minus 0.8, and we'll set this one here. When we come in here and it does the weight logic, it will remove the weight of the NPCs from it. So are we currently in the Egyptian zone? We are. And you'll see eventually when the elves, there you go, we've only got elves. Look, there are no Egyptians spawning because we've removed their weight from it. How cool is that? Very, very nice. That one popped out. How dare he? But yes, now we can run up here, and when we go inside the Knights area, it will spawn Knights and Egyptians until we go fully in the Knights area, and the Egyptians have no hold on anymore. And then, come on, spawn in when I'm not looking. There you go. Spawn, spawn, spawn. There. We're now spawning Egyptians again and Knights, but no elves. So you can really take this system far now, and you can place these huge zones around your area. It doesn't matter how big or small they are. You could put it in a small little building like this, or you could put gigantic areas in like that. You can even, how cool is this, dynamically spawn them in order to change it. So if you have a territory system where you defeat the bad guys, you take over the territory, you can swap out the area and have it take effect. How cool is that, ladies and gentlemen? That is really, really cool. So I am going to jump back in now and just briefly talk about what we've changed here, because I know it was a lot of complicatedness and I don't want anybody to miss it. So if you've got a few errors, this area should hopefully help you out a little bit. If you have already done it and it's all working, thank you for watching. I hope it went well. Please leave a like and a comment. Tell me what areas you're going to add in. But let's just break it down then. So we've changed it now that when we call randomly get NPCs, we no longer just shuffle them and pick one, right? What we do is we come into our update NPCs to spawn function, which runs periodically. It doesn't run all the time. And we've built in a check to make sure it doesn't do it in the middle of a spawn, because that'll cause issues. But it basically loops over all the NPCs it needs to spawn, and it adds them to this special property here. So we can simulate it by clicking it. It'll pick a profile, elf generic, and it'll say, you're 0.2. We can add one in and say knight, and it'll say, you're 0.8. But then if we try to add another one in of knight, it'll say, hey, don't add 0.8 to it again. Don't add the knight in again. Instead, add on your weight to it, so 1.6. So it increases the amount it can be chosen from. Make sure I've not got that in there. And it loops over all the generic ones, and then all of the area-specific ones. So if we run into one of the big areas, and it calculates all of this cache here. Let's see if we can actually see this in real time. Can we see this on the NPC Spawner? Because this will be really useful. Yes, we can. Good. So you can see, at the moment, it's going to spawn the Egyptian generic at 0.8% chance. So 80% chance it's going to spawn it, but because it's the only one, it always picks it. If I run into this Egyptian one, you see now it's now got 8% chance to spawn the generic, but 0 chance to spawn the Egyptian because we minused it off. If I run into the crossover realm, Here, you'll see it's got 80% chance of spawning the elf, 80% chance of the knight, which balances itself off to 40-40. But because there's only 2 of them, it's really 50-50. And if we carry on running, now we've got 80% chance or 50-50 to spawn the 2 of them. And if we run out, you can see it's removed it, and now we're back to 1 again. And you can have hundreds in there, and it'll calculate it super efficiently. And that's what this big cache function here does. Right at the end, we calculate the total weight, so that's the progress bar. How long is each segment of that progress for what we're going to pick from? And then back on our randomly get NPC here, we loop over all of those. We generate a random number based on the total weight we've got, so 100%, 50%, 10%. We pick a number. We loop over here and we figure out which weight progress section or segment are we a part of. As soon as we find it, we return that segment and say, hey, spawn an Egyptian, spawn an elf. Which means, if we erase all of that, which means if we say 0 to 0.1 is the Egyptian, I don't know, I'll do a pharaoh symbol or something, yeah, is the Egyptian. Over here is 0.1 to 0.7, might be the elves, I don't know, do big ears. There's the elf segment. But then we've got this tiny sliver here of 0.8, which will be the security police. I don't know, do a shield or something. And then the remainder is just, I don't know, civilization people to 1. When we randomly pick a number, you see the segments it's got to pick from. It now means it will accurately pick either a decent value here, a greater chance of picking one here, a very slim chance of picking a number here, or a decent chance of picking a number here. And that's how we've built it now. So it's a really mathematically probability set spawner, which will be really, really cool. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that helped. If you've got any issues, please comment below and I'll give you a hand, or join the Discord. I'm always happy to get to it. We are getting to the end of the NPC spawning system soon, but we've got plenty more we can add to it just yet. In the next episode, we're going to look at doing a cheat overrides, because that is a key concept in Grand Theft Auto games, and I love that idea. Where you can run into an area, no matter what it is, you can type in "show me clowns" or something, and it will override all of the spawning logic and say, only give me clowns. That's what we're going to do next time. If you want that, I do highly recommend you have the cheat system we built into the game, either the console commands or the actual code versions, either way, but yes. Thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that was helpful. This system is coming along very nicely now, and we're going to be able to populate entire games really, really easily. Thanks for watching. My name is Decryption, and I will see you and all of these people next time.